So we will get started here. So what we're going to talk about today, first we're going to talk about why the body needs protein, carbohydrate, and fat. Those are what macros are. 3 macronutrients: protein, carbohydrate, and fat. We're going to talk about how much of each you need based off of your goals and your body type and your activity. We're going to talk about how you count macros in order to improve your body composition and performance. And we're also going to talk about where macro counting fails and how to avoid its pitfalls. So as far as my nutrition philosophy goes, I describe myself as diet agnostic. I don't believe that any one diet is right for everybody. Like keto is not right for everybody. Paleo is not right for everybody. Whatever kind of the diet du jour is, whatever is in vogue right now is not right for everybody. So I really like using macro counting as a template for learning what works for you. Because although it might constitute a diet for a little bit, through counting your macros and learning what portion sizes should look like for you, and then eventually, like Chase, being able to eat intuitively based off of what you've learned is a really good way to create sustainable eating habits. Because the thing is, you really should have a long life ahead of you. That's at least what we hope. So I like to think about taking a behavior-based approach or a habit-based approach to dietary changes. It takes a little bit of time to change a behavior or to change a habit, but assuming you've got this long life ahead of you, you've got plenty of time to focus on any one behavior change or any one habit change. So you can use macronutrients and calorie counting as kind of a template for figuring out what the behavior change that you should make is, and experimenting with behavior changes and seeing if they actually have an impact on your body composition or your performance or whatever you're looking to achieve. That's why certain things like following templates or following meal plans tend to fail, is because usually it represents a departure from whatever your current set of habits are. It's like you said, it's very restrictive. So the thing is, okay, for the 6 to 8 weeks that you might follow this meal plan or this diet template, it might work, you might get great results, but then you might find that as soon as it's over, you just completely fall off because it was a complete departure from what was normal for you. So when it's done, you start to go back towards whatever your old habits were. If instead you take this habit-based approach, you use calories and macronutrients as essentially a template for figuring out what changes you need to make are, and you focus on those changes, and when they become second nature, when they become automatic for you, then that's when it becomes sustainable, because it's just like a habit that's kind of been bundled into all the other habits that you already have. So that's really the path that I want you to think about taking, and we're going to talk about counting calories, counting macronutrients, and what is right for you, so you can start to figure out some of those habit changes that will work, and we'll talk about that. So first things first, we'll talk about protein. Protein, all the macronutrients are important, but does anybody know what the most important macronutrient is? No, none of them are the most important. It's like saying, what's the most important? Heart, brain, liver. If you take one out of the equation, you're gonna die. Same thing goes for macronutrients here. But I like to talk about protein first because everyone in here is a member here. That means inherently that you're active. We would consider you an athlete. So the protein needs of athletes are a little bit higher than your typical sedentary population. Before we get into why that is, we'll talk a little bit about the roles that protein plays in the body, just so you get an understanding of the importance of this macronutrient. First things first, your tissue structure and the function of your body is made up of proteins. So your muscle, the structure of your muscle is made up of proteins. Your skin, the structure of your skin is made up of protein. Your cells essentially sequence proteins into the tissues that make up your body. So it's really important to make sure that you are not deficient in protein. Protein also helps with certain bodily functions. Hormone and enzyme production. So epinephrine here, this is, think adrenaline. So the hormones that your body is essentially using during exercise to break down the energy that it has stored, those are protein derived or amino acid derived hormones. Also melatonin, which most people know as the sleep hormone, is also an amino acid derived hormone. As far as enzymes go, does anyone know what an enzyme is? Shout it out if you know. What do you know about enzymes?
It's a protein that degrades like a given substrate.
Yeah, essentially. So pretty much in plain English, think about it as a catalyst, meaning that it's a thing, think about a lock and a key. So it's kind of like the key to a chemical reaction in the body. So, we've got enzymes that help break down carbohydrates to essentially unleash the energy potential of the carbohydrates. And we've got all these different enzymes that are catalysts to all the different chemical reactions that essentially allow you to survive and do all the things that you do. So that's another reason proteins are super important. Also, very relevant right now, so many people are sick, immune system function. If your immune cells release proteins in order to mediate some of these immune reactions, they're protein derived. So that's another reason proteins are very important. And then energy. All of the macronutrients are important for energy. Your body can break them down, essentially unleash their energy potential, and then you can use that to do whatever motor function you need to do. Move, exercise, things of that nature. So carbohydrates. I like to talk about them second for active or athletic populations, because the thing is, really what they're most important for is energy. Specifically, the brain is one of the neediest organs. If you were just sitting in bed all day, just completely vegging out, what percentage of the energy that your body uses do you think your brain accounts for? This tiny little organ weighs a couple pounds out of the, however many 100 pounds you weigh. What percentage of your total daily energy do you think that the brain takes up when you are just vegging out?
50%.
A little bit lower, but good guess.
20, 30?
Yeah, right around there, 20 to 30 is best estimate. So the brain, in terms of its size versus its energy needs, it's a really needy organ. And although keto people will tell you that ketones are a great fuel source for the brain, and yes, they are a fuel source for the brain, it prefers glucose. It prefers carbohydrate. If carbohydrates are available, that's what the brain is going to use. So really important for the brain, also important for exercise, especially CrossFit type of exercises. Usually the muscle storage of carbohydrate, it's called glycogen. The glycolytic and the oxidative energy systems, the two essentially primary energy systems you would use for, let's say, the conditioning portion of class, they're going to run really well off of carbohydrates. So they're going to run off the ones stored in your muscle. So as an active person, it's really important to make sure that you're not completely depleting the carbohydrate in your muscle. Otherwise, your performance is really going to suffer. All right? So fats. Although I'm talking about them last, you're about to see why fats are an absolute critical piece of the puzzle here. They have a ton of different roles in the body. So first one is that they protect cells. The outside layer of every single cell, the plasma membrane, is a lipid layer. It's made up of fats, and it essentially regulates what can go into and out of the cell. So we need to make sure we have enough fat to make sure that we've got integrity to each cell in our body. Your brain is made up of fats and cholesterols. Your nervous system tissue is made up of fats and cholesterols. So the nervous system is what is going to tell your muscles that you have to move. Really important thing to understand is that a lot of strength adaptations, so your ability to do a 1 rep max deadlift, you probably have enough muscle to lift hundreds of pounds more than you do. You've probably heard stories of like parents that lift cars off So the idea is if you can get your nervous system to recruit more of your muscles to do the work at hand, then you're going to be able to move more weight or do more work. So if you are deprived of fats in your diet and you have an unhealthy nervous system because of it, those nervous system adaptations like learning a skill, learning a bar muscle up, learning how to lift heavier weights, it's going to be a little bit of an uphill battle if your nervous system doesn't have what it needs to actually grow. So steroid hormone production or sex hormone production is going to be based off of fat and cholesterol and some B vitamins as well. So your testosterone, your estrogen, your progesterone, your DHEA, all of these good anabolic, sex, and steroid hormones are going to be fat derived. So you need to make sure that you've got enough in your diet so that hormone production doesn't get downregulated. Also, fat is an organ. So it's the largest fuel source in your body. Even me at probably 10% body fat, 185 pounds, I could probably run 20-something marathons back to back without any food, just based off of the fat that's stored on my body and the energy potential that it has. And then also as an organ, it helps insulate your body, so it helps with temperature regulation, and it's an insulator. So does everybody now understand why each of the macronutrients is equally important, especially if you're an active person? Yeah, so we don't want to put you on anything that's low carb, low fat, high protein, whatever. We don't want to necessarily bias any of the macronutrients to an extreme degree for a long period of time, because then you're going to end up having issues with any of those reasons that each macronutrient is important. So now we're going to talk about how to actually calculate your daily macronutrients. And the first thing that we need to do is we need to calculate your daily calorie needs. When it comes down to it, barring that you have some thyroid issues or some hormonal issues that will change your metabolism a little bit, it really is a physics equation. It is energy in minus energy out is going to essentially dictate your energy balance. So we really need to get the calories right. If you get two things right, if you get calorie intake and protein intake right, you're gonna make some decent progress towards body composition changes. Everything else after that is just kind of icing on the cake, essentially. But if you only get those two things right, you're gonna be able to preserve your muscle mass if you're losing fat, and you'll be able to lose fat. Or if you're looking to gain muscle, you'll be able to put on muscle, and you'll do it in a healthy way. So first thing we're gonna end up doing in a moment here, don't jump to your handouts just yet, is we're gonna calculate your calorie needs. But as I mentioned, it really is just this energy balance equation, as long as you don't have some thyroid hormone issues or some other hormonal issues that are gonna throw off your ability to either lose or gain fat or muscle. So your energy in, so your calories that you consume from your diet, minus the energy that you use through a number of different things, which we'll discuss in a minute, is your energy balance. If your energy balance is skewed towards where you're consuming more than you burn, then that's what we call a calorie surplus. You will gain mass. Doesn't necessarily mean you'll gain muscle mass, only you're probably gonna gain muscle and fat mass. Really depends also on your training. If you consume less than you burn, that is what we call a calorie deficit. So that means that you are going to lose body mass. Doesn't necessarily mean that you're gonna lose all body fat. You might lose body fat, and you might lose water, and you might lose muscle. So the thing is, by getting the macronutrient balance right, we're gonna make sure that it's mostly losing fat there. If you consume roughly the same amount as you burn, then that means that you're going to be on a eukaloric diet. There is no deficit, there is no surplus, and essentially your body weight or your body mass is going to stay the same. So as far as the calories out goes, the calories burned goes, that side of the equation is dictated by a bunch of things that are important to understand. All right, so you've got your resting metabolic rate. So as I mentioned earlier, if you were just sitting in bed, completely vegged out, not really doing anything, then basic body functions like your heart beating, your lungs respiring, your body heat staying at roughly 98 degrees, all of these really basic functions that just keep you alive, that's gonna be your resting metabolic rate. And that is the bulk of your daily energy expenditure. All right, for most people, that's gonna be, probably 1,300 to 2,000 plus calories, depending on how big your body is. Next, we've got exercise activity. So thinking just going to the gym and doing conscious exercise. You're going to exercise. That activity, depending on how long you do it, what intensity you do it for, you might burn an extra 200 calories up to thousands of calories if you're putting in a ton of volume. But really when it comes down to it, unless you're training for hours on end at really high intensities, exercise activity is probably only gonna be about a quarter of the energy expenditure that your resting metabolic rate is, maybe half. From there, going down a little bit, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Really long way of saying just any movement that you do that is not conscious exercise. So me moving my hands, talking to you, pacing around right now, my body is using energy to do that. That's non-exercise activity thermogenesis. If you wear a Fitbit or some type of step tracker and it's counting steps, each of those steps is not necessarily conscious exercise, but it would be falling under the non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So this is gonna make up another decent chunk of your daily energy, but again, nothing compared to your resting metabolic rate. Last thing that we've got here is the thermic effect of feeding. So this is when you eat a protein, essentially your body has to take that protein, break it down, and then decide what to do with the building blocks that it's got, and that takes energy. If you have carbohydrates, your body has to digest it, break it down, and then use it. And so that breaking down and that using of whatever you consume is this thermic effect of feeding. It has an energy cost. Okay? So foods like protein, for example, since they are harder to break down for your body and they are also more energy expensive to use, that means that protein is going to have a little bit higher thermic effect of feeding. So based off of how much you eat, if you eat, let's say, a high protein diet and you're eating a ton of food and you're on a calorie surplus, your thermic effect of feeding might be pretty high because your body has high energy need to break all that food down and then also use it. If you're on a calorie deficit and you're eating less food because you're on like a diet, let's say, by eating less food, this is going to contribute less to that energy burned part of the calorie balance equation. Does that make sense? Cool. And then also, I just put this down there with an asterisk. The thing is, your body regulating its temperature is going to mostly fall under this resting metabolic rate thing. But if you, for example, are exposing yourself to extreme temperatures, that will also raise or pretty much raise your metabolic rate. So that's just another thing, but most people on a daily basis aren't being exposed to extreme temperatures. So that's not really a practical thing for most people. So right now what we're gonna do is we're gonna go to the handout and we're gonna calculate your calorie needs. So you can take a look. You'll probably need a calculator here unless you're really good at arithmetic. And you also will need a pen. So does everybody have a pen and maybe a calculator on their phone? Otherwise, we got some calculators up here. Cool. So what I'm gonna have you do is you're gonna decide what your goal is. Are you looking to lose fat? Are you looking to just maintain where you're at right now, but perform better or just really eat healthier? Or are you looking to gain some mass? So first, determine your goal. Next, you're gonna determine what your current activity level is. So sedentary, that means, maybe you come into a few classes per week, but you've got pretty much your ass in a chair most of the rest of the day. That means that you're gonna be on the sedentary end. Moderate activity, you're coming into maybe 3-4 classes a week. You've got a little bit of activity outside of that. But again, you might be a little bit more sedentary at work, but you're conscious about getting up, moving, you might have a standing desk, whatever. If you're very active, that means that essentially you are borderline competitive training. You're putting in a lot of hours at the gym, you're very active outside the gym, you might even have an active job. So you also will notice that we've got this range here of numbers. If you are currently overweight or carrying around extra body fat, my recommendation is that you multiply by the lower end of the range. If you're currently very lean and your activity level, let's say, is towards the upper end of any of these categories, multiply by the upper end here. All right. I've got some other use cases or some other examples of where you should fall in the range on the worksheet there. So let's just determine your goal, determine your activity level, and determine what end of the range you want to multiply by. Multiply your body weight by that number, and then at the bottom, write down what your calories should be.